Community Water Quality Forum, the Nose Knows. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. I'd also like to thank our water quality partners. We have Heal the Ocean and Santa Barbara Channel Keeper and the Urban Creeks Council here tonight, and they have tables in the back with lots of information about things their organizations are working on. And I also like to recognize and thank our partners in this project, which include Dr. Trish Holden's lab at UCSB and the Water Environment Research Foundation, which provided a grant for us to do this project. And finally, I'd like to thank the Environmental Canine Services and Scott and Karen Reynolds for coming out all the way from Lansing, Michigan with their dogs Logan and Sable to do this work this week. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our Water Quality Research Coordinator for the City Creeks Division, Dr. Jill Murray, and she's going to get started with a discussion about our source tracking research program. Thank you.
Thanks, Cameron, and thanks for everyone who came out on this Wednesday night to hear more about our research. I'm going to talk a little bit about our monitoring program background so you know how we got to the point where we're out recruiting a sewage-sniffing dog to come to our area and help us with our research. I'll focus on beach water quality and talk about the work that we're doing with UCSB, which is much broader than what we're going to just focus on tonight so that you'll have a better idea of what we know and what we don't know. That's fine. Okay, so we have a very comprehensive research and monitoring program, and we use a lot of different tools. We sample in a lot of different places, and ways you can learn more about that are on our website. We post our water quality reports, and then we'll be giving an update next week at our Creeks Advisory Committee meeting. So if you come to that or catch that on City TV, you can also learn more about our program. When we're deciding what to sample for, we're thinking, and where to test, we're thinking about what beneficial uses of the creeks are we actually trying to protect, and what do we want to know more about. Sometimes we're asking questions about pollutants that might harm fish and other aquatic organisms that live in creeks, and sometimes we're thinking about the pollutants that would be more harmful in terms of recreation for people. And that's the line of research that we're talking about tonight. And so those questions help us decide what we're testing for and where. So with beach water quality, that was one of the motivations for Measure B and the Creeks Division being formed, and it's still one of our primary lines of questioning and research. But I wanted to give a little bit of background to a lot of people in the audience here. This is going to be very familiar, but I know there are others who don't know this, and especially those who might be catching this on TV. So all counties in California are required to test many beaches on a weekly basis, and Santa Barbara County does that here. And they have to post warnings at the beaches if the indicator bacteria levels are above a certain level, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And the county, Santa Barbara Channel Keeper, Heal the Ocean, and other groups report those results to the public. So you might hear about a beach report card or weekly beach grades. Those are all based on the samples that the county has been taken. And we look at those results also and have done some statistical analysis of that data, trying to figure out when and where we have the most problems. But back to the indicator bacteria. These are what the county tests for on a weekly basis in the surf zone. And the reason why the regulations and the postings are based on these is the indicator bacteria are always found in sewage. And so it's thought that it can be an indicator that sewage might be in an area, and it might correlate with how often people might get sick. But the indicator bacteria are not harmful themselves. They're supposed to be indicative that there might be some pathogens or viruses or bacteria present that could cause illnesses. And it's been around, this method of testing has been around for a long time because it's cheap, it's relatively easy, and it's a relatively quick test. Not quick enough, it turns out, for some of the beach testing. But there are major issues with indicator bacteria testing to communicate to the public about beach water quality. And some of the problems are that indicator bacteria are also, in addition to being found in sewage, are also found in storm drains and soil and decaying plants. And so the more research that's done, the more we're learning that it's not, although you always find a lot of indicator bacteria in sewage, you don't, when you find them, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's sewage present. And the two biggest problems with this is that it can lead to providing incorrect information for beachgoers. So there might be a beach that is truly polluted and it's not showing up on indicator bacteria tests, or vice versa. One beach might have a lot of beach warnings that's in fact not really harmful at all for swimming. And then from our perspective, it can also lead us to, if we're required to reduce indicator bacteria levels, it could lead us to making some incorrect choices about the best water quality improvement strategies. Because what we really want to do is not just lower indicator bacteria levels, but we really want to protect human health and create a very safe swimming environment for everyone. And this is recognized at a national and international level, and so the US EPA is going to release a new approach and a new set of criteria and directions in the coming year. They've been required to do that by a lawsuit, and so we're really excited to see what they might come up with in the next year or two. Okay, so then, so it's going towards trying to understand why do our beaches have the beach warnings? Why do we have high indicator bacteria? Where are the indicator bacteria coming from? Is it really indicative of sewage or not? And so at the pretty early on in the Creeks Division history, Jill Zachary, who was the manager, paired up with some researchers, Dr. Trish Holden at UCSB, and started working on, at that point it was really methods development, trying to develop tools where they could use DNA-based techniques to say, are these bacteria really from humans or from other animal or waste sources? And once it was found in some spots there was actually some human waste getting into the storm drains, then the questions turned to where is that coming from? We start working our way up creeks and storm drains. And then also the UCSB researchers are excellent at continually developing and testing new methods and tools. And so some of the results from that research, it's been several years now, we have found hot spots within the storm drain network of Laguna Channel, and that's a site, the discharge of Laguna Channel is now targeted for a UV disinfection project based on those results. And then the Haley Drain, where it discharges to Mission Creek, has been found to be a hot spot that is now diverted to the sanitary sewer. And the same is true with the Hope Drain, where that goes into Arroyo Burro Creek. And through that work, it has really been confirmed that we're not just finding this stuff in the creek or where people, we know some people are using the creeks as a bathroom at times, but this is up the creek into the storm drain network. And but I want to stop here and just let people know the concentrations that we find are typically low, especially if we can find it in the creeks. It's very, very, very low concentration. We want to solve these problems. Human waste or sewage does not belong in our storm drains or creeks, but we still feel strongly that the swimming here is very safe. We're all still using the beaches and recreating in the creeks. And I know that's a little bit complicated, but I don't want this line of research to make people feel any more cautious about swimming. The beach is wonderful, and we just want to clean up any problems that we find. Okay, so when we think about how is any kind of human waste or sewage getting into storm drains, what are the potential sources? And we hear about direct deposit, and this is typically, people are talking about homeless in the creeks. We don't need special tools to see that. Anyone can see that. And the Creeks Division actually has a contractor that comes out to the sites that are regularly used and takes that waste away and cleans it up. Another hypothesis is leaking sewer lines that could be getting into storm drain lines. That could only happen where the two are very close together and both, it would have to be a very unique situation. We are testing that hypothesis in several locations. There's also the possibility of an illicit direct connection from, this could be a plumber accidentally hooks up a toilet drain, or a lateral from a house accidentally hooks it up to a storm drain line instead of to the sewer, to the main sewer line. And we have found a couple of, we have kind of separate to this research found a couple of cases of that, and those have been rectified. And those are the kinds of things we're trying to find in our work here. And then another hypothesis is that there are RV dwellers who dump their tanks into the storm drains and into the gutter and storm drain. And we're also looking into testing that hypothesis. What we found in this research is UCSB has been very successful at finding the hot spots and we can letting us know where we have those problems. But going up and actually finding where it's getting in is difficult. It's hard because the results are really variable over time and space. It takes several weeks to process the samples, so we don't have a result right away. So we don't know which direction to go up when we have a complicated storm drain layout. And it's a high cost per sample. We've done a lot of this work with grant funding from the state of California, Prop 50, and we have an ongoing grant that we're working on with UCSB to build a toolbox of all of these methods, and then we'll put that together in a format that other communities in California can use. And so we'll be adding some dye testing and smoke testing and televising to the DNA tools. And then in parallel with that, in fact, I was at a conference with the researchers from UCSB, and we saw Scott Reynolds from Environmental Canine Services give a talk about Sable, the sewage-sniffing dog. I think most people in the audience probably thought, oh, this is cool, this is novel, this is neat. The three of us thought, oh my gosh, we have to get this dog to Santa Barbara, because the promise of real-time results and this low cost per sample so that we could cover a lot of area at once and know which direction to turn was, we really probably understood more than almost anyone else who does this kind of research how badly that was needed. And then, so we put together a proposal and got grant funding to do this work. And our goal, the goal of our partnership is to test these methods so that they have a little more rigor to them than was available when we first, as far as understanding their reliability, and then be able, so the methods could be promoted. If it works well, we want other communities to use this tool. And so with this research, we're taking the dogs out and testing them in areas where we know our results from previous research. We're also we're going to investigate the suitability of using the dogs to test things like the idea about RV dumping. We're going to take a neighborhood where we know some RVs are commonly parked for long periods of time and just go sniff every catch basin and see if we're getting any hints of dumping. And we want these results to be published and accessible to other communities. And it's the Water Environment Research Foundation that has provided the funding for this project, and we're really grateful to that. So our research team is ECS and the dogs, Scott and Karen Reynolds, and they're going to provide much more information about how they developed these ideas and came up with it, and their light bulb that went off, and how they train the dogs. Dr. Patricia Holden at UCSB, she was unable to attend tonight, but her staff research assistant, Lori Vandenverst, and Dr. Bram Serku are here to talk about their work, and they can get as technical or as general as you like if you want to go up to them after and speak. And then the City of Santa Barbara, of course, our division, and we have a lot of help from Streets Division. The traffic control and the manhole pulling is pretty intense with this work. And wastewater has also been helpful, and we'll be relying on them more as we try and resolve some of the little spots that we've found. Okay, so this is the work that we're doing this week. I already mentioned we're trying to correlate the dog's response with the DNA techniques. We're going further into the hotspots that we know about, looking at the RV dumping, and we're also going to try to answer the question of how much, if this really works well, how much would it cost to just test every storm drain in our community? So we'll take a defined area and go walk every block that has a storm drain and catch basins and manholes and open every single one and test those just with the dog and not the DNA tools, and just get some answers about how much it would take to blanket an entire section of a community. And we'll also be walking up the creeks and having the dogs test every outfall that comes into the creek. And then the last part is we'll be having another event in addition to this forum that's geared towards people who work in stormwater and dog handling, and try and have some discussions about how feasible it would be to expand this program or have trained dogs in other areas and what that would take. So here's just finish up with some pictures. This is the dogs in the field here. I can go on. This is a UCSB collecting samples at one of the sites that the dogs alerted positive to. And you can go, and so far we've been doing it 3 days, 2.5. So far, so good. It's really wonderful. Sable has been alerting, which is when she barks for positive, as we would expect based on our historical knowledge of the areas. When we took them, the first thing we did was take them to a drain, which I knew if we tested for the DNA tools was going to come back positive, and she barked right away. Oh, phew. Okay, this works. We've learned that we really can cover a lot of ground, so much more ground than using our water sampling tools. And yes, we get our real-time results. We have the low cost per sample, and I think something we didn't quite understand going into it is just how many samples per day you can get a response to. I don't want this to take away from the tools that we use with UCSB, because I think you're always going to need the confirmation that you've got the signal, either the chemical or the DNA-based signal for the human waste as you move forward to resolve issues. That's good. And then we didn't have it. Okay, that's it. So I'm going to, if you have any questions, I'm going to ask you to hold off and let Scott speak, and then, because the questions will probably be answered by Scott.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out today. I know this is kind of an odd thing to talk about, a dog that goes around and sticks its head in the sewer and barks yes or no if there's something not quite right there. But this has been really kind of an interesting journey. I'm just going to briefly go through how the idea was, how it came about, and how the training went, and then a little bit about Sable's 3-year career, if you will, and then talk about how we added in Logan and one of our other teammates at ECS. So this is Sable on the left when he was at the animal shelter in Lake Odessa, Michigan. And we decided when we were thinking about doing this program that we were going to adopt a dog from a shelter rather than go and get a purebred animal and spend money and worry about the pedigree and all that, because there's so many in the shelters that need a home and also a great job to give back to nature. So, and then you can see that he's matured over the years on the picture on the right when he's actually out there working. So in 2006, I was working for a large environmental engineering firm at their Lansing, Michigan location, and they were involved in illicit discharge investigations with a client. And this client had decided that they were going to go above and beyond their requirements, their federal requirements and state requirements for testing all of their stormwater discharges, and they were actually going to test all dry weather flow from every single pipe in their county. And I'm not sure if they realized this at the very beginning, but this was going to include physically walking over 3,000 miles of open drains like the picture here in their county to do this task. So as we got into this project, we realized this was huge, and it was taking enormous amounts of time to go to every single pipe and sample all of the flow that was coming out, and then waiting 2 or 3 weeks to get all the results back. So Dan Christian, who was my supervisor at the time, he knew that I had a background in dog training and scent training, and he came to me and he said, "Do you think that you could train a dog essentially to smell poop?" Well, I laughed. It was something I had never thought about, and then the more we talked about it and the more we got into this discussion of what the possibilities were, I said, "Yeah, let's do it." And then, of course, then he said, "Well, make it happen," and then it was up to me to work it out. I don't think it's any secret that canines are involved in a lot of different scent work. This list that I have up here is by no means all-inclusive, But these are some of the really interesting things that dogs are doing right now. You can find some pretty crazy stuff up there. One of my new favorite ones is the illegal DVD scenting dog. They actually have trained a dog to detect bootleg DVDs that are coming in from black market through China. And this dog has been so successful that the black market distributors have actually put a bounty on this dog's head because he has disrupted their business to the point where they're losing significant money. Some of the other ones that you see, gas leaks, they use them for detecting natural gas leaks in buildings, and also some of them through the actual soil. And then cancer. The cancer research that they've been doing with dogs in skin, bladder, and lung cancer is actually progressing pretty amazing. The ones that are highlighted there are ones that I've actually, and Karen as well, has trained and certified dogs. Karen did a lot with the search and rescue for human remains, drowning victims, and live human as well. It's no secret that dogs have a good nose. What's interesting is because they've been domesticated over the years, their natural instinct to use their nose to find something has sort of dead, and we provide food to them, we give them their toys, and yes, we do play games with them, and they have to use their nose a little bit. But now, 75% of what they naturally do is given them by nature, but now there's this larger portion of what we have to do is to nurture that ingrained wanting to find something and use their nose, and this is where the training comes in to actually train their drive to find exactly what we want them to find. And I don't know if you can read the chart on the right there, but this is an indication of how many scent receptors the dogs have, approximately in the millions. And the Bloodhound, the German Shepherd, and the Beagle are all on the far right with somewhere between 250 and 300 million scent receptors, and the humans are on the far left, somewhere around 2 million. So, but what really makes the dogs awesome at doing this is not just the number of scent receptors that they have, but it's the ability to discriminate and filter out background scents. That's what makes them so superior to us in their scenting ability. So I always use the beef stew analogy. If you walk into a house and somebody's making beef stew, you might recognize the smell of beef stew. But the dog walks into the room and they can pick out every single ingredient separately and define that within their brain as a recognized smell. And that's really the key to their success in doing this. So in 2007, I was looking for a dog to adopt for this project, and I found this video of Sable where he was sitting in front of this woman with a tennis ball in her hand. And his focus on that woman was so extreme. There were all these other dogs running around, and he wasn't paying attention to any of them. And she throws this ball into a big pond, and Sable runs out and does a big doggy belly flop into the pond, goes out, gets the ball, and brings it right back. And the first thing I thought was, I want to meet this dog, because it already, just from that video, it had some of the things that I was looking for this project. First thing had to be that it wasn't afraid of water, because we were going to be in a lot of it. And just that focus and that drive and the determination and being able to ignore those other things was really cool. So we started the training in April of 2007, and it was a positive reinforcement-based training. You ask the dog to do something, if it does it, it gets a reward. It's that simple. At the beginning, we used septage that was drawn from a residential on-site treatment, so a septic tank, and went through the imprinting stage. And the imprinting is essentially you just teach the dog, this is the scent I want you to find, and as soon as, when you show it to him, you give him a treat. So you associate stinky stuff, I get a treat. And the dog just kind of thinks that simply sometimes. Then we went into a free search where we would just let the dog kind of wander around and use its nose to follow it to the target scent. And what that teaches the dog to do is go from the lowest concentration to the highest concentration, which is important when we're in the storm sewer systems, because we want them to keep going and getting to the highest concentration so we can pinpoint where the source is. Then we teach them the alert, and the dog kind of tells us what they're comfortable with. With Sable, it's a very loud bark, but with Logan, he just sits. So the dog kind of determines what they're more comfortable with, and through the training process, this kind of starts to come out on its own. The last part of it is really the important part, and this is sort of what this whole project kind of comes together with the DNA testing, is called proofing. There's all these things that we encounter out there in the field and things that get into the storm drain that we do not want the dogs to hit on, and that being animal feces. That's the big one. So as part of the training and being the director of training for ECS, I get the lovely job of going around and collecting both wild and domestic animal scat, and we use that in the training process. Fortunately, we live in a agricultural area, so if you go up and knock on somebody's door and say, I'd like some goat manure, it's not really that odd of a question. But we actually introduce that into our training, and we teach the dogs to leave it alone. We don't want them to alert on it. We only want the human base. We only want the human base, and they get the reward for that each time. So that's a really important part of the process. So after we got through the controlled settings and doing the training there, we actually went into field trials. And this is where we took Sable out into the field, into areas that we had a known test samples. We knew what the condition of that area was, and we used that as part of the training. So we were taking him to areas, we'd let him sniff, and we'd give him a reward, or we'd reinforce what he was supposed to do if he messed up. And also we were introducing all these other factors of environment and terrain and temperature and mosquitoes and all this other stuff to make his tracking abilities and sending abilities even stronger. One of the things that I really have to stress about this whole thing is that this is really a team effort. You can't just train a dog and then turn it over to somebody and have them go out and try to do this. The dog handler has to have experience and understand not just their dog and how the little idiosyncrasies of the dog and the way it behaves, and maybe it's having a difficult time working out a scent problem, that there may be a different approach. But it's understanding scent theory, and then also understanding the environment. Enclosed storm sewer systems have a life of their own. The size of the pipe, the flow conditions, sometimes even the material. Some of those enclosed storm sewer systems will actually have an air current that flows through them. You can be standing in front of a large open pipe and there's wind coming out of it. It's just the dynamics of it. And you have to understand how that affects how the dog is going to work that and how they're going to let you know if something's there. Just a couple of shots of some of the work that we've done. This is actually, we progressed from the field trials to actual work, where we would take Sable to locations we had no idea what the current conditions were, and we were expecting Sable to tell us. This is in downtown Lansing, Michigan, which is the capital of Michigan, and this is after a sewer separation project. The city had a combined sewer overflow, and they asked us to come in after the construction was done and search the storm sewers to make sure that all of the sanitary leads from residential and commercial had been properly disconnected from the storm sewer and put into the sanitary. And so this is what we're doing here. One of the things that, just kind of an interesting thing that we did, one of our cases, this is sort of supporting how the dog can really assist you in finding something very quickly that laboratory results may have missed. And this particular one is a traditional laboratory result for detergents or surfactants. We were out in this neighborhood, and we had opened up a storm manhole that the client had sent us to, and they had asked us to do some testing because they had a suspicion there was something going on there. But it had been a full year since they had been there, and we had no laboratory results prior to that. So we open up the manhole, and the way that we do it is we open the manhole up, and the handler doesn't look in there, takes the dog over there immediately, lets the dog investigate, records the results, and then we go into testing if needed. Sable was acting really funny. He kept his nose down in there. I could tell he could smell something, but he wasn't alerting at it. So I said, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk him through this neighborhood and have him check all the surface drains. Well, we went up probably about 2 more upstream, and he started barking. And so I went to the next one, and he kept barking and barking. And at this point, he was getting mad at me because I hadn't given him his squeaky ball yet, which is his reward. So I give him this was the last one in the line, and so I gave him the squeaky ball. And when we opened it up, what we found was that a residential laundry was discharging directly into the storm sewer system. In Michigan, we have a lot of basements. And what's a common practice is that people put their clothes laundry in the basement, and they have what's called a sump pump, where all the groundwater from around the house goes into a sump, and then it's pumped out to the storm sewer system. Well, they commonly just discharge your clothes laundry right into the sump pump. So when that pump kicks on to get rid of the groundwater, it also takes all of your discharge from your laundry and puts it into the storm sewer system. And that's exactly what was happening here. The interesting thing is, and I know it's hard to tell in this picture, is that the discharge, the outlet from this is up here in the corner, is that the foam and the suds in the water hadn't gotten up high enough yet to get all the way through the storm sewer system to the area where we had started. And so if we had taken a laboratory test where we had been asked to at that time, it probably would not have shown up in the lab results, and we would have missed this discharge. So Sable was definitely instrumental in being able to track this down. And we actually knocked on the lady's door. She was home. We explained what was going on, and this was removed within 24 hours. So that was a really great case for us. We also add in a lot of different weather conditions. Most of the work that we do is in dry weather, which means that we haven't had rain or it's less than 1/10 of an inch of rain in 72 hours. But the temperature gamut goes from 20 below zero to, extreme temperatures and humidity. So the dogs have to learn to work through that whole thing. And then when Karen and I started ECS, we kind of knew that there would be other dogs at some point. And we have had a strange way of getting dogs. They just sort of just come to us in interesting ways. And we got this little collie from a bad home situation we rescued him from, and we brought him into the house, and I think I think Sable was less than impressed with him at the beginning, because at that point he was kind of the prima donna of the pack. But we immediately noticed that Logan had an amazing nose and a potential for this work. And we also watched him mature somewhat over the years, and he started to really show an interest in what we were doing as we started going through that same training process with Logan, with the scent imprinting and things like that. And he has a lot of fun. He's really our kind of our wild card. So we started training him last fall officially. And this is actually, Santa Barbara here is his very first field trial. So he's gone through all of the controlled setting stuff, and we brought him here as part of his next training step. So this has been an amazing experience for him. We actually have a whole training system in our backyard. Like I said, we live out in the country. We do not have sanitary or storm sewer service out there other than open drains. But we actually brought in manhole castings and all this stuff that we use in our backyard as part of the training stuff to make it more of a real world environment for them. We also have an individual named Dan Ringel and his dog Sky that has also joined us. And Sky is also adopted from an animal shelter as well. And he's kind of an interesting mix. He's an Akita Pit Bull mix. And originally I wouldn't have logically, I wouldn't have chose that as a dog to pick to do this work, but his drive is unbelievable. This dog has one of those things where he will just go and go and go until he gets it. Some dogs you can take a tennis ball and put it underneath a box, and he goes, I don't know where it is. But this dog knows how to use his nose and also how to use his sight and his brain to find the things that he's looking for. And he gets very aggressive in his scratching. That's actually his alert, to the point where he actually ripped the pipe out of the box that we were training on. So there's no question when he finds what he's looking for. This is just a couple more shots of some of the training stuff that we have in the backyard. And all that white stuff around it is actually leftover snow. We started training really early in the spring, and I think it was probably around 20 degrees or so when we were out there training. So just a few more shots. You can see the one up in the corner there's got quite a bit of snow. So again, we're just going through the temperature gamut to get the dogs used to working in different environments, because the scent does change during the training programs. More shots of Logan going through, and again, I mentioned that his is an actual sit. So when he finds what he's looking for, he does a nice gentle sit. And it's different than just asking him to sit, or if he's tired, he sits, because in the whole environment of actually doing the project and asking him to work, it's when he does it. It's not just that he's tired. And I don't know if you can see this picture, but as any good trainer does, you make the dog watch the replays. We actually videotaped one of the sessions that we had done out there, and I was watching it, because as a dog handler, when you're really up close and working with the dog, you can't always see what's going on. So having the opportunity to actually watch yourself and watch the things that the dog's doing from a distance is a really great tool for a dog handler to learn. So I was watching this at home, and Sable was actually sleeping, and he heard the squeaky ball on the TV, and that got his attention. And what you can't see on there is that the speakers for the television are underneath, and are all wet from his nose prints trying to poke on the speaker to figure out where the ball was at. So some of the things I think that's really important as people in the community is, what can I do to kind of help out with some of these sewage problems? And the first thing is if you see something or smell something that isn't right and you know it's not right, you need to tell somebody about it. This one in the upper left corner here was a sanitary sewer overflow. Essentially, the sanitary sewer had a block in it, and it caused the sewage to just leak right out of the cover and onto the ground. The problem is that just above that, a resident, built a bridge across the raw sewage so they could get to the river. I can't believe that somebody didn't realize that was a problem. The other thing is, this went on for so long that when you used Google Earth, which the photos were about 4 years old, you could see the lake of sewage on Google Earth, and that was 4 years before we found this. So I mean, it's one of those things you have to really kind of look at your environment and say, something's wrong here, and let somebody know about it. And obviously, picking up after your pet. Now, if you can train them to do that, it's even better. So we're working on that one. Some of the things, just some shots again of us working here in Santa Barbara this week. It's really been an interesting experience, and we've been to some pretty cool places this week. And one thing I want to say is that I've been around to a lot of different places, talking to different groups and talking to different stormwater people. And I have to tell you that you are very lucky to have the people here with the Creeks Division and with the university working on this stuff, because they are very dedicated to what they're doing. And when you get people like Jill out there, getting her hands dirty and working on stuff like this, I'm impressed by that. A lot of times we go to places and we work with someone and they're sitting behind the desk. And they're not out here pounding the pavement and looking in the manholes with you and trying to figure out what's going on. And I think you're very lucky to have these people working with you. Any questions? I hope there's some. And one of the things, I know this is kind of strange and it's kind of new, but don't be afraid to ask questions about the dogs or any of the training process. We get strange questions all the time, and we kind of encourage them. So, it's not I guess that's not a challenge, but just, does anybody have any questions at all? Yes, sir. Yes.
Is that his only reward, or is it his one he works for the most, and what is Logan's reward?
You had asked that I had mentioned that Sable's reward was a squeaky ball. Yeah, that is his reward. He's not real food motivated. I started out with giving him food treats, but he's very, very picky about what he eats. And when he's working, he hardly ever eats. Actually, we've been here, 3 days now, and he's hardly eaten at all when he's been here, because he's very self-regulates. But the squeaky ball is his one toy, and that's the only time he really gets it is when he's working. So it's a special thing that he gets, and he gets pretty upset if you don't give it to him when he barks. He grabs it, he'll chase it, and he grabs it, and he just mouths it, and squeaky, 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 until it drives you crazy, and you take it away from him. And Logan's reward is food. Logan is a food hound. That's why he's still on leash, because this table of stuff over here would be gone already if we let him off. So, any other questions? Any as well for Jill too.
How do you train the dogs to not alert to animal waste versus human?
Okay.
The difference in odor?
Well, that was part of, we do that as part of the proofing process. So what we do is we actually expose them to as much of the animal waste as we can in terms of scenting. So we'll collect it, and we put it in a container so they can't physically access it, but scent-wise they can smell it. And then as soon as they get up to it, we say leave it, and we take them away from it. And then we take them to something that we want them to find and encourage that and then reward them. So they have the ability to tell the difference between the two with their scenting through that training.
Animals are amazing creatures, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
I have a question. Actually, this came from Trey watching the different alerts, and he would like to know why one barks and one sits for their alert, or scratching in the case of your newest dog.
That's a great question. Like the dogs kind of tell you what they're comfortable with. Sable, he barked really easily. I shouldn't say easily. It actually took me a while to get him to do it, and I went through some special training to get him to bark, and once he started doing it, he liked it. Logan is not a barking dog, really. He barks when he wants to, if he sees something really interesting moving, but in terms of working with him, we couldn't get him to bark. And so, but he would sit really easily. And so that's what we used. And with Sky, it was the same way. We tried the bark, and he didn't want to do it, but he was always pawing at stuff. As soon as he would smell the stinky stuff, he would paw at it. And so we said, well, that's a perfect thing. And that's what he likes to do. It comes natural to him, so that's what we're going to use. Yes? We've done a lot of presentations. The work itself was mostly in the Michigan area. That's where the majority of the work has been, regional, mostly because of the cost of travel right now. We typically don't like to fly the dogs because right now we have to put them in cargo in the planes, and that actually can cause some problems with their noses from the jet fumes, and also there's some safety issues there. So we've done some presentations in Hawaii. We were in Huntington Beach last year here for the EPA Beaches Conference, Phoenix, Arizona, Milwaukee, so we get around and, kind of spreading out the information. It's a lot of fun. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the dogs were developed, the program was developed for a particular use, and the 3,000-mile long trail. Did the dogs actually work this trail, and was that project actually seen through?
Yeah, the project was actually seen through. The requirements for the stormwater monitoring go in a 5-year cycle. So we were I think halfway through that 5-year cycle, so we finished it out using the dogs. And there were, this one case scenario I had in there about the laundry discharge was just one of many. There was one that we did that was, I think was instrumental. I don't think, it would have taken probably 3 times as long to find the actual source without the dog. It was a very complicated project. It was a very large diameter pipe, and it discharged next to a highway, and then it went into a residential area that was very dense. And I think by the time we found the source, we calculated that it had traveled through somewhere around 5,000 linear feet of pipe. And there were so many intersections, and there was a lot of, in Michigan, there's a lot of groundwater infiltration into the system, so you're getting a lot of flow in there when there shouldn't be. So you're always going off on these branches and all of these side streets trying to figure out where it is. And the dog was instrumental in that, because otherwise, if we had to sample every single one of those flowing pipes, it would have been thousands of dollars in laboratory testing. And it would have taken weeks and weeks to get the results back, and then you just keep returning to the same place again trying to follow it up. So with the dogs, we were able to do that within, I think, 3 to 5 days, until we got up close to it, and then of course we had to take the laboratory samples for enforcement action. So that's, yeah, it was a challenging project, but that was just a fantastic training ground for the dog.
Along those lines, are the dogs able to stay on a particular scent? So if they catch a scent at some point in a creek or in the distribution system, are they able to be taken upstream or to an area where you suspect that source may be, where the source may actually be, and be able to distinguish between one human source and another? And along that same line, there was mention that RVs were an issue. Could the dogs indicate which RV? Because the pipe's sitting right there at the back of the vehicle. Could the dog alert a suspected site and then identify the vehicle?
Maybe. The first part of the question is if they can follow the scent up through the drain. In an open drain, typically we can't follow the scent in the water itself in an open ditch and track it upstream to where the pipe is. Normally what we would do is, if it's an open drain, we would collect samples at different areas to sort of divide the stream into different sections, and then we would take those bottles away from that area to, like, say, a parking lot or something we call a clean area, and have the dogs run the bottles. And then we would record the alerts on those so that we have some idea where that source might be. So we have a section of that. Now, the other way that we do it is we go up the stream and we have the dogs check every pipe that's discharging into the stream. Now, in that case, once the dog gives us an alert, we come up out of the stream and we start following that pipeline and opening manholes, and the dog can then take us up that stream to where the potential source is. Sometimes we get lucky and we nail it, like that one that I showed where we were right outside the house. More often than not, what happens is we take it and we bracket it down to a smaller section. Instead of having to do like 5,000 linear feet of pipe in every single house in there, we can say, well, it's in this block, or it's between these two manholes. Now, if I understand your question, I think you're talking more about what we call scent discrimination, which would be similar to a tracking dog, where you give them the shoe and off they go to get the criminal kind of thing. I don't know if we can do that with the sewage components. If we could actually have, it was that guy that did it, it came from him. But in terms of the RV discharge, I think the potential is there to say that they've discharged recently. But one of the things you have to keep in mind is that if an RV was parked beside the road and they drove to a legal dump site and discharged their waste and then came back, that scent is still going to be there in that pipe. So it's kind of a difficult one to say, yes, he did it and he did it here, because the tank is designed to hold that, so there's nothing illegal there. I think more what we're looking for is trying to figure out where the problem areas are by having the dogs go there and check the catch basins and say, okay, it's happening, it's occurring in this area, so then trying to find some other way to watch that area or to do educational things and enforcement action if needed. But having the dog go directly to the RV and say it was this one, I'm not sure that could happen. That's great questions, though.
In between the jobs that the dogs are doing, do you have to continually practice with them? And do they live at home with you?
Yes, these dogs are our pets. I mean, really, that's...
How do you keep them from exploring your bathrooms all the time?
No, that's a great question. That's a great question. A couple of things. First of all, yes, we do train all the time. The training never ends, and it never ends for a couple of different reasons. One is that we kind of look at it as a scientific instrument, if you will, which always needs to be calibrated. You always have to make sure that it's running the way it is and it needs maintenance. The other thing is that, yes, they are our pets. They live at home with us, and they are very spoiled. They get on the bed and snuggle and all that kind of stuff. And when they're not working, they play. They have a great backyard that's fenced in, and we have a special dog room so when we're not at home, they're out in the garage in this dog room, and it's heated and air conditioning and automatic water, and I mean, they do real well. I forgot what your last question was now. Oh, the bathrooms, yeah. Well, we get that question a lot. How do you keep the dog from just, hitting on this, or are they sticking their head in the toilet, or, if you pass gas, what happens? I mean, those are valid questions, because if you think about the components of the stuff that we're training these dogs to find, it's all there. One of the key things with training the dogs is indicating to them that you're on the job, okay? And if you see the vests that we have on the dogs and some of the pictures that we had, they have a special working harness that goes on, and then they have their vests that go on. And they know when it's time, because the minute that thing comes off the hook in the back room, all chaos. I mean, it's just complete chaos. So I think they just kind of ignore it otherwise. But when you put that stuff on them, they know it's time to work, and we give them a command. Sable is get to work, and Logan is find the stuff. And if you say that to him when he's just laying around the house, his ears go up, and it's time to work. So that's how we kind of keep it separate. Anybody else? Questions for Jill too? Okay. Well, thank you very much.
I think we'll just finish by saying thanks again for coming out, and feel free again to check out our website and any of our water quality monitoring reports, or call if you have any questions about what we're doing. And if you think you have a hot spot anywhere near where you live or work, definitely give us a call. Thanks.
And I want to welcome you tonight to our Community Water Quality Forum, the Nose Knows. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. I'd also like to thank our water quality partners. We have Heal the Ocean and Santa Barbara Channel Keeper and the Urban Creeks Council here tonight, and they have tables in the back with lots of information about things their organizations are working on. And I also like to recognize and thank our partners in this project, which include Dr. Trish Holden's lab at UCSB and the Water Environment Research